in the field of hydrology. First of all, the water cycle. The water cycle was first propounded by Sir Bernard Palissy in the year 1580. According to him, the water evaporates from the ocean. Then it forms into clouds. Then the cloud moves. Then it rises. Then it condenses. Then water falls, and then the water goes back to the ocean, and the water cycle is completed. When we go back in time, in the year 7th century BC, Thales of Miletus, he said that it was the springs of the ocean that is picked up by the winds and fall into the interior as rain. People during that time, they did not know how did the rain falls. They do not know how did the underground water is formed. And even at the time of Plato and at the Aristotle's time, they also believed in this theory. In fact, Aristotle himself, he said that it is the spray of the ocean that cool down the mountains caverns, which then feed up the springs. People did not know how do springs form. How do springs form? But in the Quran, it is mentioned in Surah Zumar chapter number 39 verse number 21. Alam tara anna Allah anzala minas sama'i ma'an fasalakahu yanabi'a fil ardi thumma yukhriju bihi zar'an mukhtalifan alwanuhu thumma yaj'aluhu hutama. Seest thou not that it is Allah who sent down the water, and then He caused it to soak in the ground? A similar message is also repeated in Surah Ar-Rum, chapter number 30, verse number 24, where Allah says, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ يُرِيكُمُ الْبَرْقَ خَوْفًا وَطَمَعًا وَيُنَزِّلُ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً. That it is Allah who sent down water from the sky, and He revived the earth therewith. And a similar message is repeated in another place in Surah Hijr, chapter number 15, verse number 22, where Allah says, وَأَرْسَلْنَا الرِّيَاحَ لَوَاقِحَ فَأَنزَلْنَا مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً فَأَسْقَيْنَاكُمُهُ وَمَا أَنْتُمْ لَهُ بِخَازِنِينَ. That we, Allah says, we send the winds to fecundate the clouds. The Arabic word used in this verse is lawaqih, which is derived from the Arabic word laqaha, which means to fecundate or to impregnate, meaning that it is Allah who sends winds to impregnate the clouds. And today science tells us that the winds, they carry pollen and form with it clouds. Or in another example, the winds carry along clouds and join them together, and then the lightning is formed, and then water falls from the sky. The Quran speaks about hydrology in a great detail. Some more verses in the Quran, like for example in Surah Al-Mu'minun, chapter number 23, verse number 18. وَأَنزَلْنَا مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً بِقَدَرٍ فَأَسْكَنَّاهُ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَإِنَّا عَلَى ذَهَابٍ بِهِ لَقَادِرُونَ. We send down water from the sky, and then we store it, and then we are able to get rid of it easily. The Quran speaks about hydrology and water cycle in great detail. Furthermore, beside these verses that I have mentioned, there are several umpteen numbers of other verses that speak about hydrology and water cycle. Like, for example, in Surah Araf, chapter number 7, verse number 57. In Surah Ra'd, chapter number 13, verse number 17. In Surah Furqan, chapter number 25, verse number 48. In Surah Fatir, chapter number 35, verse number 9. In Surah Yasin, chapter number 36, verse number 34. In Surah Jathiyah, chapter number 45, verse number 5. In Surah Qaf, chapter number 50, verse number 9 and 10. In Surah Qaf, chapter number 50, verse number 9 and 10. In Surah Waqi'ah, chapter number 56, verse number 67 and 68. In Surah in Surah Mulk, chapter number 67, verse number 30. I can go on and on and on, relating only the verses that speaks about hydrology and water cycle. The Quran speak about water cycle and hydrology in great detail. And again, there is one verse in Surah Mu'minun, in Surah Nur, chapter number 24, verse number 43. Allah says, Alam tara anna Allah yuzji sahaba thumma yu'allifu baynahu thumma yaj'aluhu rukama. Seest thou not that Allah sends down winds and then he forms, he raises up the clouds and then he forms them into heaps of mountain. Then he fragments them, and then water, you can see water falling from their midst. In this verse, we can see that the Quran mentions that Allah makes the cloud in form of mountain. And today, if you travel on the flight and you look through the window down to the mountains, you will see that they resemble mountains. And there were no aeroplanes 1,400 years ago. Imagine the Quran mentioning this in the Quran. This mentioned in the Quran. How is it possible? Who could have known this? Who could have mentioned this 1,400 years ago? The Quran speaks about hydrology in very details in other several verses. In the field of geology,